Very good morning to you. Welcome to my thought for the day. Well, the rest of chapter 2 of 2 Peter is all about the consequences for those people who live in error and who teach error and who entice people to error. And I don't really want to focus on all this detail. You can read it. I think reading it, that there were people that Peter knew in his day who had seemed to be followers of Jesus, and then as a means of lining their own pockets, they enticed people to follow their thinking. And I don't want to upset anybody, but I think one person who might fit into this category is the gentleman who started to write this thing called the Passion Bible, which is not a translation but a paraphrase, and has been sold in small sections as it's been published to line his pockets. He is a man who claims to have new revelation from God that God has never given to anyone else, all down through the years, and he has now this wonderful new revelation of God. This has all the trappings of the things that Peter is describing here. Beware of modern, I don't like to call them versions, but modern publications that claim to be the Bible. But actually they are one man's interpretation of scriptures. And if you doubt my word for it, look up on YouTube criticisms of the Passion Bible. And there have been some wonderful people who are scholars who know the scriptures incredibly well in the original languages, who will point out how erroneous the Passion Bible is. And if we're going to study the Bible, we need to study it as closely to the original as possible, rather than if he'd called it a series of my thoughts. If my thoughts were written down, I would not claim them to be the Bible. But that's what this man is claiming, that God has given him extra special new revelation. And he's calling it a Bible, and it's not. Do look at it. Don't throw my words out. It's just a warning. Some of these modern translations are very good, but a lot of them are paraphrases. They're not exact translations of the words of Scripture. It's been rephrased to make it easier to read in modern English, but some of them add a lot to the original text, or they explain the text in their understanding of it, and that sometimes it often doesn't really help, because we find, well, anyway, I'm not going to say anymore. It's a little hobby horse. No, it's not a hobby horse. It's a deep felt feeling. But what he says here is he describes them in some interesting terms. He says these are waterless springs and mists driven by a storm. Now, you're not going to get living water from a spring that has no water in it. And a mist is not going to last very long if there's a storm. And verse 19 says, they promise men freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a man, to that he is enslaved. There are a lot of things taught today that have become so important to the people teaching them that they can't hear a contrary word about it at all, and they have become obsessed. And it's not freedom at all. It's not freedom, it is actually slavery. So these are warnings. These are warnings. You have to remember, please remember that in this world, the enemy does not leave the church of God alone, the ecclesia of God alone. The people he attacks most of all are those who are most effective for the kingdom. Why would he bother to attack people who are already working on his side? and who are already destroying or damaging those who follow God. Satan knows, he knows that if we're completely convinced that Jesus died for us and that we're saved, he knows he can't divert us from that track. But if he can divert us from the truth in some way, if he can distract us, or he can feed us things, and most of the things he feeds to us, when you look at how he started in the Garden of Eden, he didn't say, God doesn't exist. What makes you think God really exists? It's a figment of your imagination, this idea that God is real. He didn't challenge their faith in God. What he did was he tried to make them believe that God had not said what he really had said, or that he hadn't really meant it. He was trying to divert them from the truth. And that's what Satan does. He tries to divert us from the truth. And sometimes that diversion seems very minor at the beginning, but it gradually moves further away. And that's why we need something like the plumb line of Amos. Amos had a vision of a plumb line. A plumb line is a string with a weight on the bottom of it, usually lead weight or heavy weight at the bottom of it, and you hang it at the side of a wall that you're building. And if it hangs true, the wall is standing upright, but the plumb line will detect even the slightest deviation from the vertical. And the thing is, when it's diverted from, it'll look a little to begin with, but it'll get wider and wider, and then the wall will not be true. And we need the plumb line of God held against the practices of every group of Christians constantly, so that we don't deviate from the truths of the gospel. Because this is what Satan wants us to do. He wants us to not preach the full gospel, that wonderful good news that sets people free. He wants to tie people up in knots, following minor issues off to one side or the other. Because if he can distract us, he halves our ability to serve the Lord where we are. So beware of him. Beware of anything that teaches something that is not in the Bible. If it's not here, and remember that again, right at the beginning of this book. What did Peter say? He said, his divine power has granted us all things that pertain to life and godliness. In other words, God hasn't left anything out of his revelation given to us through the New Testament for someone else to find it years later. He hasn't left anything out. He has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. That's the truth. Hold on to the truth and don't let yourself be distracted by anything else. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.